Hi, I'm Sean Carlock. Welcome to Send It 24. Today we're going to cover loophole shooting techniques. Our loophole shooting techniques we've developed over several years now, and we basically break them up into a close range technique and a short range technique based on the distance of the loophole. So we have close loopholes at 3, 4, 5 yards, and we have longer range loopholes where we're 18, 20 yards, and out to intermediate barriers, which we'll cover down range, where we talk about shooting over, around, under, and through an intermediate barrier where there's a hole in it that are at distances 400 or 500 yards away. So we'll go ahead and get into that now. Okay, let's talk about the thing that splits up our two techniques for close loopholes and for longer loopholes or intermediate barriers. The thing that will separate these two techniques is how much hold under is available in our reticle. Now, if we look at this reticle here, it is a Nightforce MOART reticle. And if you look above the crosshairs, you will see that there's only 10 minutes available hold under in the reticle. Now, once we've determined that, we're going to go to our ballistics program. We're going to pull up our drop chart in that function, and we're going to see where 10 minutes of hold under gets us. Now we can see right away that if we're looking at a distance of only 8 yards from the loophole, we don't have enough hold under. So using our longer range or intermediate barrier technique, the closest distance we can be to the loophole or barrier is around 14 yards. Anything less than 14 yards, we have to use our close range technique. Anything greater than 14 yards, and we can use our long range technique. We'll get into those now. One of the first things we must know when shooting through a loophole is the size of the loophole. If our scope to bore height, and that is the critical measurement from the center line of the scope to the center line of the bore, is smaller than the loophole, we're in good shape. If we have a scope to bore height of 2.7 inches, we want a loophole of at least 3 inches to shoot through. Bigger is better in terms of shooting through it, but the bigger the loophole, the less concealment, the less protection we have. So ideally we want to be just slightly bigger by an inch or 3/4 of an inch than our scope to bore height. So at 2.7 inches we're really looking for 3 1/4 or something in that measurement zone. If we have a loophole that is larger than our scope to bore, our technique is really quite simple. First we have to know the size of the loophole. If we can get right up to the loophole, we can simply measure it. I like to carry a little short measuring rod in my pack out of plastic that's 3 1/4 inches long. That gives me the clearance I need for a 2.7 inch sight to bore height. Quick, easy, simple. If we cannot get up to the loophole, there is a technique for measuring the loophole even at close distance with our reticle. We'll show you that now. Now, when we use our reticle to measure the hole, there's several places in the reticle we can measure. I like to use the width with the MOAR reticle because it gives me maximum coverage in the reticle. If I put the nighttime crossbar post on the edge of the reticle and measure across the reticle to the other side, I get right at 52 minutes hole diameter. Once we know the loophole size in minutes, the formula to find out how big the hole is pretty simple. We take the yards to the loophole divided by 100 times 1.047 times the loophole size in minutes to get the diameter in inches. Once we've determined that the loophole has sufficient clearance to allow for our sight to bore height measurement, we're now ready to start look at targets and engagement. So here's what we do. We pinwheel our target out there with our laser rangefinder. We find it at, say, 900 yards. We get into our ballistics program. We pull up what the dope is. In this case, we're going to say it's 27 minutes of correction. We get the crosshairs to the very top of the loophole, right up at the very top where you can just see the edge of the daylight. And we hold 27 minutes in the reticle. Now this may require that you adjust your position so that you can be close to the top of the loophole and hold 27 minutes, but this is the best way to use the loophole. Now what looks strange when using this technique is when you're engaging a target at only 200 to 300 yards. You still have to have the crosshairs up toward the very top of the loophole so that your barrel clears the bottom of the loophole, but your target will be up very close to the top of the loophole as well because you'll only be holding maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But you have to start at the top of the loophole with the crosshair to ensure clearance of the bullet at the bottom. Now that we've focused and finished up on close range loopholes, we're going to look at long range loopholes and intermediate barrier issues. The technique for shooting these shots is much simpler than the close range loopholes. Quite simply, we range the distance to the loophole. We get into our ballistics program and we look up what the correction is at the loophole. Now whether this is 20 yards or 400 yards, we simply get in the program, put that in as our target distance, and it will tell us what to dial the scope up for the loophole. Now, once we've dialed up or down and zeroed for the loophole, we have to figure out what hold we need in the reticle for the target. Not all ballistic programs are created equal, and this is where I like to just use the drop chart feature whenever I can. If your program gives you consistent results when you test it out, then you can go ahead and dial up and then change your zero distance to the loophole distance, and then it will give you the hold calculated in the program. I like to look at the drop chart. In most cases, I'll pick the yardage in there I need to go to at the loophole, and I'll subtract it from the overall distance, and that'll give me the hold. It's quick. I am not changing my zero. I'm not monkeying with my program too much, and I just tend to like to run that way a little better myself. Here we have a closer range target that will actually require us to hold under, since the amount we dialed up to the loophole is greater than the correction for the target. In the next example here, we're going to have a target that's further away. This one is going to require 14 minutes of correction in elevation. So again, as long as we can hold 14 minutes in the reticle and the crosshair does not touch the loophole, we are clear and good to go. Okay, here we are looking through a 1-inch loophole at a target that is 160 yards away. Our loophole is 10 yards away. We're shooting a 22 rimfire, so this shot just on flat ground from a 50-yard zero would normally require about 15.5 minutes of elevation. We're going to get all set up here. We're going to shoot through this 1-inch loophole. We're going to dial up for 10 yards, so we're going to come up 7.5 minutes. We're going to hold the rest of the 15.5 minutes in the reticle. So we're going to dial 7.5, hold 8, and as long as the crosshair doesn't touch the top of the loophole, we will be good to go. Okay, we've got our loophole shot set up here. Our barrier's at 10 yards. Our target's at 160. We're going to dial up 7.5 minutes. For the barrier, I'm going to hold the crosshair right up just under the top edge of the loophole, and then I'm going to hold the remaining 8 minutes of drop in the reticle. The only thing I want to be critical of, is that the crosshair doesn't get too close to the top of the loophole. So we'll skim a bullet just under the top of the loophole, drop it on into the target. 160 yards, total drop here with 22 rimfire is 15.5 minutes. Hit right on the money. So, once was luck, do it again, right? Hit. So, loophole shooting can be that simple. There's a lot of complicated formulas and practices out there. They don't have to be that complicated. Get in some practice, figure out what you like, and get everything streamlined down, and you'll have a good solid loophole shooting technique.